was over here saying, don't they have chemistry? Wasn't there something weird with Rhaenyra and Daemon and how they looked at each other? Didn't they almost have something going on, or am I imagining that? No, he took her to a brothel. It's Blue. Make sure you like, subscribe, and go follow me on my Twitch, where I live stream 3 times a week, and also my Patreon, where I have more content on there that I don't post here.
You know, Sheila? Now there's a whole new obesity drug for those of us who can't afford Ozempic and Mounjaro. I've controlled all my cravings to be thinner with Lizzo.
Yeah, I was about to say. Today, I'm going to be reacting to something new. House of Dragon Season 1 recap. Make sure you go and check out the channel that I got it from. It's linked down below. I wanted to go ahead and watch the recap instead of rewatching the entire first season again. One, because the first episode of the second season comes out kind of soon. And I did already watch season 1. I kind of just need a little bit of a refresher. But I thought I would react to it because there's a small chance that I'm going to attempt to react to the season 2 of House of Dragon. We'll see how it goes. Not everything's been smooth lately, but we'll see how it goes. The wing just...
In 101 AC, King Jaehaerys Targaryen I assembles a great council to elect a successor, since both of his sons have died. The lords and houses of the 7 kingdoms choose Viserys, Jaehaerys' eldest grandson, over Rhaenys, Jaehaerys' eldest grandchild, simply because he is a man and she is a woman. After King Jaehaerys has long passed and in the 9th year of King Viserys Targaryen's reign as king on the Iron Throne, his wife Aemma is almost due with a pregnancy that he hopes will finally give him a son. Given that his daughter, Rhaenyra, cannot be his heir, in anticipation of his heir's birth, the king organizes a tournament. During the tournament, his wife goes into a complicated labor that eventually requires the king to choose between the queen and the child's life. Pushed to the wall, Viserys opts for the child's life, but the child dies soon after birth, leaving the king without a wife, a son, and heir. After the funeral, the small council discusses the king's successor. Otto Hightower, the king's hand, tries to convince Viserys that Daemon, Viserys' younger brother, long since had his eyes on the throne, and is a poor choice of a successor. Viserys doesn't believe him until Otto informs him that Daemon had called his dead son the heir for a day. In retaliation, Viserys strips Daemon of his claim as his successor and makes Rhaenyra heir to the Iron Throne, also telling her of Aegon the Conqueror's dream of the fall of men by the hands of the White Walkers during the Long Night, and that if men is to survive, a Targaryen must sit on the Iron Throne and unite the 7 kingdoms to defeat the others. Later, Otto sends Alicent, his daughter and Rhaenyra's best friend, to help the king grieve the loss of the queen by offering herself to him.
I was thrown off by that. I actually thought the Alicent thing came way later. That's a lot for the first episode. That's a lot to dump. Also, the thing about the hand of the king, he has a very Littlefinger vibe about him. I don't remember everything from Game of Thrones, but Littlefinger was very, pretty sure, snaky. And that's kind of the vibe that it seems with this guy. Totally different perspectives easily. You could think, yes, Daemon actually said that. And yes, Daemon totally has eyes on the throne. But there's also question behind his intention in telling him that. Because if he thinks that Daemon is harder competition to get rid of and get out of the way because the hand of the king is interested in the throne himself somehow, he would maybe see, would I rather want my daughter to try to get with that nightmare, the younger brother of the king? No. Or would I rather it end up being handed to Rhaenyra and then somehow just get her out of the way?
6 months later, Lord Corlys Velaryon, husband to Princess Rhaenys, the king's cousin, storms into a council meeting to complain about the destruction of his ships and the murder of his men at the Stepstones by the Triarchy, a coalition from Essos consisting of the free cities of Lys, Myr, and Teresh. However, the king declines to take action to avoid a war with the free cities. When Rhaenyra voices her disagreement about this in the small council, she is sent away to choose a new member for the Kingsguard, which happens to be Sir Criston Cole. Sometime later, the king falls ill after getting a cut from the Iron Throne, and only gets worse as time goes on. As the
It's
king
from a
holds a
cut?
conversation with Alicent in his chamber, Otto walks in and informs the king that Daemon has retreated to Dragonstone and is to wed another wife, but also that he has stolen the dragon egg which was reserved for the king's dead son, indicating that he is claiming himself to be the true heir. Angered by Daemon's theft, Viserys sends Otto and a few men to retrieve the egg. Unknown to them, Princess Rhaenyra follows them on her dragon Syrax and convinces Daemon to surrender the egg and his claim to the throne, solving the family crisis without any blood being shed. Meanwhile, back at King's Landing, the king seeks counsel regarding Lord Corlys's plan to arrange his 12-year-old daughter for the king and gets the green light. However, when he announces his intent to take a new wife the following day, he decides to take Alicent instead. Lord Corlys and Rhaenyra don't take this well. As a result, Lord Corlys seeks help from the shunned Daemon with his triarchy problem in the Stepstones.
I think the psychology of Alicent would probably just get more and more interesting from here, because it seems like she's already just kind of a thing that's being used by other people. As of right now, it's her father. He's kind of just using her as a chess piece to get their name into the kingdom. Whereas a lot of other people sometimes try to wedge themselves into some type of position. He quite literally has to use his daughter because there's nothing useful of him or his name specifically other than being a hand to the king and maybe being in his ear. He kind of realizes that that's only valuable so long. So him having his daughter be some type of comfort or cook or just tending therapist to the king after he lost his wife is one thing, but also the fact that it was announced at this meeting. The weird chemistry between her and her uncle, Rhaenyra and Daemon, that's a thing. That's a thing that they did in the show. They have chemistry.
3 years later, Daemon and Corlys are still fighting the Triarchy on the Stepstones, with the Triarchy being led by the Myrish Prince Admiral Kragus Drahar, also known as the Crab Feeder, for feeding his prisoners of war to the crabs. Meanwhile,
What?
back at King's Landing, the people celebrate the second name day of Aegon II, Viserys' first son with Alicent, and they commemorate it with a hunt. During the celebration, Rhaenyra finds out, to her displeasure, that her father intends to wed her to Lord Jason Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock. As an alternative, Otto suggests Viserys marry Rhaenyra to Aegon, but Viserys turns that down instantly. Shortly after, Lord Lionel Strong, the Master of Laws, suggests that the king marry the princess to Laenor, son of Corlys, to re-strengthen the bond between the two houses again, and the king ponders on it. After the hunt, the king sends reinforcements to Daemon and Corlys at the Stepstones, and being asked for help by Vaemond Valerian, Corlys's brother. However, after hearing of this, Daemon takes the fight to the Triarchy and the Crab Feeder himself, killing the Prince Admiral in single combat and vanquishing the Triarchy forces. Back in King's Landing, Viserys and Rhaenyra hold a conversation where she pours out her heart. Viserys assuages his daughter's fears by letting her know he doesn't intend to replace her as heir, but instead strengthen her hold on the throne.
Seems like a very important episode too, because that's kind of where the dynamic shifts and you start seeing where all the pieces are falling. Now that you do know the characters and what their intentions are or what motivates them, you're starting to see how it actually plays out, I think, in this episode. A little bit harder to review, but I'll maybe just make this one a little bit quicker. Feel really bad for Rhaenyra because you can just kind of see how everybody around her is almost working against her, except maybe her father. Her own friend getting with her father is just so weird. Again, what do you do with that? It sounded like he wanted the 12-year-old girl to marry the king. Way bigger age gap and less likely chance of having children successfully than if he were to be with Alicent, so it's a little bit more understandable for him to just say, no, Alicent. But with this, now that it could just be his daughter who's handed off to make the bond better, it sounds a little bit more reasonable because, one, you are kind of making up for just going and marrying Alicent, and two, if the throne really does go back to Rhaenyra, it also can now be made up to go back to that side of the family too, because they're marrying with each other.
Rhaenyra's 2-month search for a husband fails, earning Viserys' displeasure. Meanwhile, her uncle Daemon returns to King's Landing, a victor and new king of the Narrow Sea, and swears allegiance to Viserys. Afterward, he links up with Rhaenyra in a brothel, and they get intimate, but don't have sex. When Rhaenyra then returns home, she decides to have sex with her personal Kingsguard, Sir Criston Cole. However, trouble soon comes knocking when one of Otto's spies informs him that he had seen the princess and Daemon in a brothel. Power-hungry as he is, Otto relays this information to the king, but the king doesn't believe him and summons Daemon. Things get tense between the king and Daemon when Daemon requests Rhaenyra's hand in marriage. Angered by his request, Viserys sends him back to the Vale, where Daemon's estranged wife, Rhea Royce, is. Later that night, Viserys informs Rhaenyra of his intention to wed her to Laenor, to which she agrees. After the conversation, the king realizes Otto has been working toward a personal ambition, all the while by putting his daughter, Alicent, into the royal bloodline, and intending to do the same with Aegon. In retaliation, Viserys strips Otto of his title as Hand of the King.
I forgot, I guess, everything in that episode because I was over here saying, don't they have chemistry? Wasn't there something weird with Rhaenyra and Daemon and how they looked at each other? Didn't they almost have something going on, or am I imagining that? No, he took her to a brothel. He took her, she's so, I don't know how old she is, but like teenager, child, she very young, very different. That's her uncle. Took her to a brothel. Yet, after making out with her, and I would imagine working something up, just kind of leaves her? That seems so weird. What was the intention? Because he doesn't seem as emotional as his brother. He seems a lot more critical thinking. So it doesn't seem like, no, never mind, Rhaenyra, we can't be together. Like he emotionally changed his mind. It almost seems like, did you lure her there, work her up, and then hope that she would just like finish whatever you both started with someone else and have a baby and get pregnant? Because that's totally what happened. She did that. She did. She immediately went and did that, whatever you didn't finish, with someone else. So, but it's also interesting because he then asks for her hand, but maybe he didn't plan that part of it because he was then dragged in to the king's chambers. He maybe didn't think, I'll get caught. So then he said, well, I'll ask for her hand. But maybe the original intention was, yeah, I want to do something to her, get her to make a not very good decision or something, maybe mess up her chances to having the throne because it would heighten his chances. And the only way that she could heighten hers is if somehow she was then tied to him as his wife. Bad Daemon.
After being sent back to the Vale, Daemon kills his wife as soon as he sees her. Meanwhile, back at King's Landing, Viserys sails to Driftmark with Rhaenyra and the new hand, Lord Lionel, to arrange the marriage between his daughter and Laenor. As he discusses with Laenor's parents, Laenor and Rhaenyra go for a walk and agree to do their parents' bidding, despite having their own love interests. Rhaenyra has a secret relationship with Sir Criston, while Laenor has one with Sir Joffrey Lonmouth. After the return to King's Landing, Sir Criston accidentally confesses his affair with Rhaenyra to Alicent after she tries to ask if there was an affair between Daemon and Rhaenyra. The recent news breaks her heart, as she took Rhaenyra's word over her father's, an act that led to the loss of his position as Hand of the King. Consequent to prior discussions between the houses Targaryen and Valerian, a celebration is hosted to celebrate Rhaenyra and Laenor's union, with Alicent attending the wedding in a green gown, the battle color of her house. However, the festivities are cut short when Sir Joffrey realizes that Sir Criston is Rhaenyra's secret lover and confronts him about it. Feeling threatened, Sir Criston Cole attacks Sir Joffrey and eventually kills him. To wrap things up, Rhaenyra and Laenor wed before their parents, while Alicent stops Sir Criston from committing suicide. Meanwhile, the king's ailing health reveals itself.
Goodness, no breaks in this show. So a little bit more confusing for me personally in this range because I'm really bad with names and they just introduced a lot of other characters with different dynamics to back side characters that we didn't really know that much about. Like one of them, Lenore, Rhaenyra, the distant cousin that Rhaenyra agreed to marry. Yikes. So he has his own lover. And I guess that guy was somehow a threat to her lover. So these two that are about to wed, cousins, distant cousins, both of their love interests literally get in a fight, and hers kill his. That part I think is confusing. Would probably make more sense if I watched the whole episode, because I'm not really sure what this recap means by he was threatened by him. Not the recap's fault. That part's not coming back to me. So unfortunately, I guess I'll just not know unless if you want to comment down below. Why was he threatened? But yes, two different sides. Looking at Alicent, you could see how she would feel really devastated if I specifically asked you if you were having an affair, or not really an affair, because you don't, well, an affair, or getting together with this guy that you really shouldn't, because I heard this thing from my father. And really heartbroken because instead of trusting her own father, she did believe her own friend. So in whatever she said to her father, or whatever was said to her husband, which is the king, made him then basically fire the hand, which was her dad. Wow, I betrayed my own father, and even more of a stake in the kingdom or my son's future interests, just because I believed your word and you lied to me.
10 years later, Rhaenyra's newborn son Joffrey fuels accusations and rumors that her sons, including the previous two, Jacaerys and Lucerys, are not Laenor's children, but that of Harwin Strong, Lionel Strong's eldest son, due to the fact of having dark-colored hair instead of silver. Despite being aware of the accusations, Viserys stands fast to his decision to keep Rhaenyra heir to the Iron Throne instead of Aegon, his firstborn son with Alicent. Meanwhile, Daemon has been married to Lady Laena, Lord Corlys's daughter, and has 2 daughters from the union, Rhaena and Baela, with one more on the way. Back at King's Landing, Sir Harwin engages Sir Criston in a fight after he speaks ill of Rhaenyra's children. After that, Sir Harwin's action lends credence to the rumors that he's the true father to Rhaenyra's children. Later that day, Lord Lionel, now Hand of the King, pitches his resignation to the king due to Sir Harwin's fight with Criston, but the king refuses, so he only accompanies his eldest son to their home of Harrenhal. However, the next day, Lionel's younger son, Larys, who has grown closer to Queen Alicent, has his father and brother killed during a fire in Harrenhal, because the queen wanted her father to be Hand of the King again, and close to her. Meanwhile, in Pentos, Lady Laena goes into hard labor, and her husband Daemon is asked to pick who to save. While he's still thinking about it, Laena leaves the labor room and commands her dragon Vhagar to burn her, to Daemon's horror.
I almost flew right past the episode 6 to episode 7 transition just because of that last part that happened in episode 6. Completely forgot, honestly, that Daemon even got married. And he not only got married, but he had children with her. It was the other side of the family, so he made the ties closer. And then he's put in the same position that his own brother was put in. And before he can make the decision, she makes the decision for him. That wasn't even one of the options. She said, take both of us. But poor Daemon, I would imagine, especially just seeing that, he probably had some feelings towards her. He probably actually loved her. Don't remember everything clearly, so I'm just assuming from this recap he did, and that's really sad. So Rhaenyra has almost everything fighting against her. Not only are you not having children that look like they should get the throne, because you can look at all of the lineage in the Targaryens, I'm thinking it's all silver hair, and you're with someone who also has silver hair, and you're going to try to convince the realm that your children have brown hair? Especially with specific rumors from the princess, queen, Lady Alicent, whatever her title would be, especially specific rumors and a confession from a man that has brown hair. It just seems like any tiny move of like that one Jenga block, everything would fall for Rhaenyra.
Upon news of Laena's death, the entire Valyrian family, the king, and other important individuals go to Driftmark for Lady Laena's funeral. After the funeral, Princess Rhaenys blames her husband, Lord Corlys, for their daughter's death, As that happens, Daemon and Rhaenyra make out by the seaside.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Aemond, one of Viserys' sons, is confronted by Baela, Rhaena, Jacaerys, and Lucerys after he takes command of Lady Laena's dragon, Vhagar. Things escalate when he calls Jacaerys and Lucerys bastards, and he loses an eye for it. Eventually, angered by the fact, Alicent demands an eye from Lucerys, but Rhaenyra steps in at the last moment and prevents it, with the king forbidding anyone to ever mention the bastard lineage of his grandchildren again. The following day, the king and queen return to King's Landing. After that, Rhaenyra and Daemon, eager to get married, conspire to fake Laenor's death so he can be free to live out his life the way he wants it, with his lover, Qarl. With the plan successful,
Qarl?
and Rhaenys and Corlys believing their son to be dead, the now seemingly widowed Rhaenyra marries her uncle Daemon for love and power, in hopes of stopping the power-hungry Hightowers from claiming the throne when the sick king will die.
Well, it definitely has a different touch on it with the different characters. He really swooped in and thought, yeah, old enough to not be weird now. But the dynamic between Rhaenyra and Daemon was always good, so I think that they did a really good job at building it up even whenever she and him were much younger, because they seemed to always have this weird chemistry of, well, considering we're already in the conversation of relatives marrying relatives and having babies, we know what the Targaryens are. It's all incest. So now that we're past that part, it would make so much sense for his younger brother to just, that makes it sound more weird, his younger brother to get with his daughter, Rhaenyra, Daemon and Rhaenyra, because who would then have more name to a throne, even if you can't convince people, daughter, this girl, well, the next to the throne would have then been your brother anyways. Why don't they just then be together?
6 years later, during a battle, Lord Corlys gets a life-threatening injury that sidelines him from the political battle for the Iron Throne. Vaemond Valerian uses the opportunity of Lord Corlys's incapacitation to further his ambition for the throne, even though Lord Corlys has already chosen Lucerys as his successor. Given that Lucerys is Rhaenyra's son, she and Daemon avail themselves at King's Landing in honor of Vaemond's petition. Upon arrival, they realize the king is in far worse condition than they expected. As a result, the court is left to Alicent and Otto. While that stews on, Alicent expresses her fury to Aegon, who has no interest in being heir to the Iron Throne, but simply wants to have fun all day, every day. Later that night, Rhaenyra pleads with Viserys to preside over the petition, and the king honors her request, showing up in court the following day to everybody's surprise. During the petition, Vaemond gets furious and openly calls Rhaenyra's children bastards despite the king's commands. His outburst leads to his death by the hands of Daemon, and the matter is resolved in Lucerys' favor. Afterward, the king admonishes his children to live as a family. When he retires to his chambers, he mistakes Alicent for Rhaenyra and tells her about the Song of Ice and Fire, a dream by Aegon the Conqueror about a prince that was promised who would unite the 7 kingdoms against a common supernatural foe. After the queen leaves, he dies.
What a sad ending to that episode, because clearly the most important thing probably being the fact that the king dies, but they really show a rapid decline in only the recent episodes, because they skipped 10 years, I think between 5 and 6, or 6 to 7? 5 to 6. So only in about 2 episodes they show how quickly everyone's just mostly preparing around him for his death and trying to line up last minute things and situations before he actually passes. However, on Alicent's side, in a good way, seeing it from her side, it's so sad and unfortunate because she actually does mistake what he's saying to her as, no, my last will and testament is the kingdom deserves a prince. That a prince is promised to the realm. I changed my mind, is what that sounds like. Because she's thinking, a prince. The prince I gave you. The one that everyone was waiting for. She's not even lying. Like I think we saw in Game of Thrones where it was lied about who said what. She actually thinks that. So now it's just sad because it's difficult to root against her if she completely misunderstood that.
When news of the king's death gets to Alicent, she, Otto, and the council make Aegon his successor. To prevent any counterclaims to the throne, Sir Harold, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, is asked to get Rhaenyra killed, but he refuses, declaring his loyalty to the king. Amidst all the chaos, Aegon's nowhere to be found. So, Alicent and her father separately send their men after him. When they eventually find Aegon, they force every lord loyal to Rhaenyra to swear allegiance to him as the new king. Meanwhile, Princess Rhaenys is locked in a room only to be let out if she agrees to support Aegon, but she refuses. The next day, Sir Eric, one of the Kingsguard, rescues Rhaenys, and she escapes to her dragon, Meleys.
They're showing a lot of similarities that Alicent ended up having with her father. You could say the push happened whenever Rhaenyra lied to her, but it also could just be because she grew up and turned into her father, and it's for her own house's name. But yes, just like her father, right after a death, they take no time to make their moves. Except hers seem a little bit more violent, because with his, it was just go sleep with the king. With hers, it's go kill my childhood best friend, heir to the throne. Even if you do believe it should rightfully be your son, especially since your husband or the king just said the prince that was promised and you misunderstood, a conversation or something. Of course, seeing it from Alicent's side, a conversation maybe just when it makes sense, because the dynamic with this doesn't really work. What are you going to send them a text? You can't. Plus, Rhaenyra at that one point did lie to her, so she probably just ever since then does see as I always have to put my kids and my house first.
She informs Daemon and Rhaenyra about Viserys' death, Aegon's ascension to the throne, and the coming attack. The shock of the news sends Rhaenyra into premature labor. As that goes on, Daemon prepares for the oncoming battle by planning to call on the allegiance of several great houses, and mustering as many dragons as they can, including Vernithor. Given that Rhaenyra was far from her due date, the child dies, and is cremated afterwards. Almost immediately, Sir Eric arrives, having stolen the king's crown, and swears his loyalty to Rhaenyra. After that, Otto arrives with his knights, bearing news from Alicent. Rhaenyra is to acknowledge Aegon as king, if she wants to keep Dragonstone and reserve high positions for her sons. Rhaenyra decides to sit on the proposal, as she doesn't intend to go to war for the Iron Throne, given her father's dream was that she would bring the kingdoms together. When Lord Corlys finally wakes, he swears allegiance to Rhaenyra. As part of their efforts to curry allies, Rhaenyra sends her sons to Lady Jane Arryn, her mother's cousin, Lord Cregan Stark of Winterfell, and Lord Boros Baratheon of Storm's End. However, when Lucerys gets to Storm's End, he unexpectedly finds Aemond, who reignites an old grudge and requests Lucerys' eye. After striking a deal with Aemond for his support in exchange for Aemond marrying his daughter, Boros restrains him from shedding blood within his jurisdiction and lets Lucerys go. But Aemond has other plans on the back of his dragon, Vhagar. As Lucerys tries to escape, his dragon Arax goes out of control and attacks Vhagar, angering it. Aemond tries to calm it, but his attempts are futile, as the dragon tears Lucerys and his dragon into pieces. News of Lucerys' death gets to Rhaenyra, leaving her completely heartbroken. And so the dance of the dragons between the Greens, referring to Alicent's party, and the Blacks, who are supporting Rhaenyra, has officially started.
Again, it's really nice that Rhaenyra had her loyalty to Rhaenyra because of maybe not only what happened to her and maybe relating to Rhaenyra, but also just being loyal to her cousin who said that he wanted his daughter to be the heir to the throne. Also, I noticed kind of an interesting circle around, or karma, for Daemon, because he kind of made fun of his older brother, the king, for having a son who was an heir for the day. I think in episode 1. all the way to the last episode, he had a son who was an heir for a day. Because the king died, making Rhaenyra heir, and then Rhaenyra gave premature birth to, I guess, either her stillborn or her son. So it just seems similar enough to where that could be a loop around. Good storytelling. It also does seem good for their part because you see all of these extra houses that would maybe have their alliance to them. In a weird way, they may not have loyalty to her. It looks like they don't, since they already promised, I forgot his name. It's not Aegon, it's the other brother with the eye patch, one of the daughters for their loyalty. So it just kind of seems like they actually have a lot more people on Hightower's side, Targaryen side, Hightower's side, than Rhaenyra might have at the beginning, at least right now. But Daemon comes with his whole own group that he's kind of been building in the background when he was selfishly wanting the throne for him, just himself. Like that one area with the crab people, like I forget the names, but he does already have connections with lots of people. Plus their reconnections with the other half of the family, like Rhaenyra's and the other ones who didn't fully get the throne themselves, which is a very important part of the throne. I mean, they still have blood tied to it, so they're really important as far as legitimacy to who should be heir. But yeah, I think that it was a really good first season. But yeah, if you guys did like this video, make sure you check out the other channel that I got the video from. And make sure you check out my Twitch where I live stream 3 times a week. And my Patreon where I have more content on there. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.